Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right, we're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go!
I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
After the amazing adventure they had at the book fair just a few weeks before, Alexandria, Levi, and Ivy couldn't help but wonder when they would be able to journey back through the pages of their favorite books once again. The book buddies recounted the incredible adventures they went on day after day, each one imagining what else they could have done and what other breathtaking things they could have seen if they had only been able to stay a bit longer. However, it was just so overwhelming when they were there initially that they really did want to go back home. But once they saw how easy it was to return back to the book fair, that day they second-guessed their decision and wished they had opted to stay just a little while longer. One day at lunchtime, Levi, Ivy, and Alexandria sat eating their sandwiches and yet again going over a plan to get back to their favorite books. And the only other person they could think of to help them was, of course, Mrs. Whittaker, their school librarian. "I think we should just ask her for help," started Levi. "I mean, she was the one who told us all about the magic of the book fair." "He's right," added Ivy. "She did handpick the books for us and everything. But she did ask that we not go on the adventure because it could be dangerous," said Alexandria, causing Levi and Ivy to frown. "Yeah, I guess I was forgetting that one little part," said Levi. "But she wasn't mad when she saw us after we got back. She even gave us the books to take home afterwards," recalled Ivy with a smile. "I guess you're right," said Alexandria. She also wanted to jump back into their favorite book once again, just like Levi and Ivy. But they had tried to bring this up to Mrs. Whittaker before, and it never went well. However, that didn't stop all of them from trying again and again. They each kept their special books from the book fair with them at all times. They brought them to school each day and took them to lunch, to recess, and even to their special classes like gym, art, music, and of course, the library. When in library class, they would always try to somehow bring up the book fair and the day they took their trip through the pages, as they called it. But Miss Whittaker would always change the subject. She never wanted to talk about it. It was almost as if she wished she'd never told them about the magic of the book fair. They knew in their hearts that she was the missing piece of the puzzle to get them back in those books, back running around and exploring with their favorite characters. But how would they convince her to help them? In the meantime, they tried everything they could think of to get back to that magical book world themselves. They even returned to the same spot in the courtyard where Miss Whittaker gave them the books that day. They placed the books on the ground, then each opened up to their favorite chapter. Next, one by one, they would close their eyes and jump. But all that did was give them shoe prints on the inside pages of their favorite book. "This is hopeless," Alexandria said one day as they sat under a large elm tree in the courtyard after lunch, turning the pages of her favorite book, The Time Traveler's Journal. "We just have to face the facts that we'll never get to go back in there." "We can't give up hope now," said Levi. "Do you think the Wiley boys would ever turn and run out of the Caves of Courage because they hit a few roadblocks? No way. They'd keep going until they secured the stolen treasure and got it back to its rightful owners." "He's got a point," said Ivy, holding their book. "And what if the fairies in the Enchanted Chronicles just stopped trying to make friends with the gentle giants? They would never have made it to the top of Marvelous Mountain, and that's where they would get the best honey and make their best honey blueberry fairy cakes." "Well, those are good points," said Alexandria. "I guess we need to take a page from one of our favorite books and not give up. We want a chance at another great adventure, and we deserve it. Follow me." Alexandria seemed very determined, and Levi and Ivy couldn't help but react to that energy and enthusiasm. They ran off to follow her as she made her way to Mrs. Whittaker's office. It was just a small room in the back of the library, decorated with old posters from book fairs of the past. They covered the walls and the door and gave a very cozy feel to the place. "Knock, knock," whispered Alexandria when she got to the door. After all, you never raise your voice in a library. "Well, hello, Alexandria, Levi, and Ivy," said Mrs. Whittaker as she turned around from eating her lunch. "What can I do for my favorite book buddies today?" Alexandria was hoping she meant that and would finally tell them the secret of getting back in their books. "I'm so glad you asked, Mrs. Whittaker," started Alexandria, "because there is one thing that we would like a little help with." Mrs. Whittaker's friendly smile turned into a nervous one, as she knew exactly what Alexandria was going to say next. So instead of waiting and answering the question, she decided to change the subject, as she always did. "Are you three here about the book collection that we're running next week?" she began. "I'm sure you all have lots of books at home that you could bring in. And remember, for every 10 books you donate, you get to take one out of the donation pile." The book buddies knew all the rules of their school's annual book collection drive very well. They could tell Miss Whittaker was getting nervous to talk about the magic book fair and the books she gave them that day, like she always did. "Miss Whittaker, we know you don't want to talk about the book fair from a few weeks ago, but it's actually all we want to talk about," said Levi. "Yeah, you need to tell us how we can get back in our books," added Ivy. "Please, Mrs. Whittaker?" asked Alexandria. "Or at the very least, tell us why you never want to talk about the magic book fair or our magical books. After all, you were the one who gave them to us and told us all about the book fair." "Yes, I know, but I also told you not to jump into those books," says Mrs. Whittaker, trying to talk in a whisper. "But you didn't listen, and it's too late. Now it's all you can think about." Miss Whittaker tried to calm herself down. The book buddies could see that she was getting a little upset, which was the last thing they wanted her to be. She was one of their favorite teachers, and they quickly knew they had to do something to make things better. "We're really sorry, Mrs. Whittaker," said Alexandria. "We really are," said Levi. "We don't want to get you upset, and we can see talking about this isn't easy for you. We can stop, even if we don't have any answers to our questions. You have to understand that it was so incredibly cool to walk through the pages of our favorite books with our favorite characters having the most amazing adventures," added Ivy. "I guess if you had done something like that, then you would know how cool it was, and then maybe you'd help us get back there. But I guess that'll never happen." The book buddy said goodbye to Miss Whittaker and turned to leave so she could finish the rest of her lunch. "But I know exactly how you feel," she whispered and caught their attention. "What do you mean? You know how we feel?" asked Alexandria with wide eyes, hoping Miss Whittaker would say exactly what she said next. "Yes, you heard me correctly. I know exactly how you feel because I was just like you when I was younger," began Miss Whittaker. "I loved reading and books were my whole life. I was in my school library all the time, just like you three, and it was my librarian that told me about the magic of the book fair. Then she gave me my favorite book and—" But before she could finish her sentence, Levi jumped in. "You went inside that book and had an amazing adventure with your favorite book characters?" he shouted excitedly. "So the magic of the book fair doesn't just take place every 100 years. It takes place whenever there are kids that love reading as much as all of us?" Yes, Levi, but no yelling in the library," said Miss Whittaker. The book buddies couldn't help but notice a glimmer of wonder and amazement in her eyes as she mentioned her book journey. "Well, if you know how amazing it is to travel through the pages of your favorite book, then why won't you help us go back?" asked Ivy. Mrs. Whittaker took a minute to answer. But when she did, she really hoped that the book buddies would listen well and understand why she'd been acting that way. "It was called The Super World of Sports. It was my favorite book when I was your age," began Mrs. Whittaker. "It was all about a young girl named Marley who had the ability to play any sport she tried incredibly well. She would get into these elite teams and play sports all over the world. She would always get into the most amazing situations where the whole game was resting on her shoulders, and she would always come through with the goal, the home run, the catch, the point, whatever she needed to win." Mrs. Whittaker looked like a little girl again, telling her story with such excitement and enthusiasm. She told the book buddies that she loved the book because she wasn't great at sports, but found them so interesting. She was able to live out her sports dreams through the main character in the book, and she loved it. The day her librarian told her she could jump into the book and play alongside Marley, she couldn't say yes fast enough. "I was just like all of you," she went on. "I had the most amazing day playing baseball, soccer, and basketball with Marley, and it was amazing. It was a world I had only read about, and now I was living in it. But when it was all over, it was all I could think about. I stopped focusing on anything else, and all I wanted to do was get back into my book. I thought reading more would help, but all it did was make me miss the magical book world more." "So your librarian wouldn't help you make one more trip either?" asked Levi. "No, she got a new job and moved to another state," answered Mrs. Whittaker. "I quickly had to realize that I'd never get to go back there, and I had to stop thinking about it, and I had to get on with other things in here in the real world. I finally became okay with it. I looked back fondly on my memories of the magical day inside my favorite book, but ultimately, I realized that I had to stop thinking about it. I became a librarian to stay close to the books, and because I knew that librarians possessed the power of the magic book fair, and the rest is history. But now I see you becoming like I was, and I don't want you to miss out on things going on around you because you're constantly wanting to return to the magical book world. Then why did you tell us about the magic at the book fair and give us the books? Asked Alexandria. Because it's amazing and incredible, and I wanted to share that with you. But also, I thought maybe you'd be fine just knowing that the magic existed. But I should have known you'd be just like me and not want to miss the opportunity to journey into your favorite book, said Miss Whittaker. I'm sorry. It's okay, Miss Whittaker, said Ivy. Thank you for telling us. It all makes a lot of sense now. At that point, lucky for everyone, the bell rang and everyone had to return to class. Thank you for understanding, said Miss Whittaker. I'll see you all tomorrow in library class. She walked off to prepare her next class lesson. And at that moment, the book buddies came up with a plan. After listening to Mrs. Whittaker's story and seeing how excited she got talking about her own book adventure, they had to find a way to get her back into her favorite book. At least one more time. And if they got to join her, well, that would be fine too.
Want to start a podcast? Spotify has an easy free platform called Spotify for Podcasters. Here's how it works. Record and edit your podcast on your phone or computer with ease. Share your podcast on Spotify and all other major platforms. You can even make video podcasts on Spotify. If you want to engage with your audience more, use Q&A and polls. You can earn money through ads and podcast subscriptions. It's completely free, no hidden cost. Give it a try. Visit www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. We love making our podcast, and working with Spotify has been amazing. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun Lively Lewis story with you.